Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. Okay, so there I've made a carbon framework for the rudder. And all I've used is thick CA in the corners and just blobbed it on and then zapped it. It's very rigid, really rigid. I'm really surprised at that, really strong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try covering that in tissue, and then I'm going to try and hold the tissue together. So I'll cover it first both sides, and then I'll water shrink it. And then I'll put dope around the edges, and I'll see if I can actually squeeze the tissue together to make one layer in the middle. And I'm hoping we can create the chamfer effect without having to use a balsa infill. Anyway, let's go and do some tissuing. I've been messing around with the mounting of the fin on the fuselage. And what I've done, you're going to really struggle to see it on the camera. That's the trouble with working with such a small scale. What you might be able to see, just in here, in fact in here, is you can see that the carbon rod that comes down from the fin actually then seems to sit on a 1mm carbon shaft. And if you look to the rear, to the next bulkhead behind it, in here, you can see again there's a little tiny piece of a carbon rod And what that means is that the fin, until we've covered it all, is removable. And when you pull it off, you just have to locate it back on those two 1mm carbon rods. And that was the reason I used tube for these two uprights rather than rod. Okay, so it gives me something to slide onto. The way this all works is really quite complex. And what we have is two tubes that run as a cruciform at the back, and they're not flush with the back. They're just, in this case, they're going to be a couple of millimeters away from the back, and they run up and across. And this is actually attached by the 4 tubes there, and then by this cruciform, the upright. And there's one mounting point at the top of the cruciform, and that one's anchoring it at the bottom already. So it's just one that goes to the tube at the top, and then the hinges are on the other side of the tube, and they go to the rudder. So you end up with a sort of a 2mm gap, a tube, a 2mm gap, and the rudder. Bit confusing, but if you look at the 3 view on the title sequence of this video, you'll see the gap that I mean, and it's very noticeable. And this is one of the reasons why as well I've got the top stringer is so much, there's a gap between the fin and the top stringer. I'm trying to emphasize that because that's, most of your points in scale competition is done or accumulated or lost. Your 3 views and your profile and your plan view, your outline effectively is where all your points go. So if you can get little things like that right, well, you've got a chance. So I'll try and keep going with that. But adding these to cruciform, and they're probably going to be 3mm carbon tube. I'm going to use tube because it's lighter than rod. Is still quite a bit of weight at the back end of the aircraft. So we've got to be very, very careful. I'm going to go and make a couple of other parts now. Anyway, I hope that's given you an idea of how we can make these structures. I don't think I'm going to do it like this with the bolts around the edges. I'm going to stick to this new carbon tubing, this carbon rod structure. So I'm still at it. What I'm trying now is I'm making one of the elevator halves. And I've used rod in these middle 2 positions so that I can put some 1mm, in fact some 0.8 carbon rods in here, joining to the other one so that I can actually align them and attach them to the fuselage. So there's 1.5mm rod all the way around the outside, and then there's these 1.5mm rods tube down here. So all I've done at the moment is cut them all to length and pin them all into position so they're all nice and locked solid. I'm not chamfered the ends up. Well, I have angled them slightly, especially here and here, but I haven't really curved them to allow it to fit, and just like that. One of the things that is useful, if you get one of these white felt pens, it's good for marking carbon rods so you can see where your marks are. You're so used to using a pencil. So these are all pinned down nice and flat, and they're exactly on the line. So all I'm going to use is some thick CA. What you do is you just make a sort of a fillet. Just a blob. Not too massive a blob, but a blob nonetheless. Then once it's set, we'll flip it over. We'll add the blobs. I've already done that one. To the other side. Now this one I'm having trouble getting in there. There we go. You don't want the blobs to be too high, too pronounced, because I don't want to sand these if I can avoid it. And I'm going to use a little bit of CA activator. So that we can get on with our day. Yeah, that's solid. So we can take all the pins out. And if we just slide a ruler underneath, we should be able to get these off. And there we have the elevator frame. It's nice and rigid. So all I'm going to do is put a little tiny blob of CA on all of those joints, but on this side. The reason it flexed on the rudder was because the section that flexed was actually the section we made in that silicone tube. So it's possible that because we didn't get the amount of fibres in there high enough, that it was too flexible. What I'll do when I make them again with the good carbon toes is I'm going to run an extra piece of carbon rod just on the inside of the straight sections, just to make it double thickness, but it won't show on the surface, hopefully. It's probably going to be a much thinner piece, maybe only a 1 mil, just to double it up. Anyway, I'll make the other one and then we'll see how we get on. That's 2 frames made, and I've made them as identical as I can, and that's the 2 elevator halves. What I'm going to try, and I don't know if this will work, is I'm going to try tissue paste again. Now I really don't get on with this, but I'm going to give it another go. Because what's happening is I'm getting wrinkles where the tissue is shrinking, and it's pulling the frames in and stuff like this. And I really don't want the tissue shrinking with the dope. And it was the dope that was causing me the grief on the bit I've just done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try putting tissue paste on the frame, and then I'll lay the frame on this tissue that isn't wet. And let's see if we can make it attach. What do you reckon? Well, it's worth a try, isn't it? So we'll give it a go. Right, that's the frame done. Let's lay it on there. Now all I'm doing is trying to pull the tissue kind of taut while it dries. And this is where I've had issues before. What I'm hoping is as this dries, it'll stick and it'll hold it all in place, and then I'll spray water on it and hopefully that'll shrink it and we get some tautness but not too much. That's my hope. Then we'll probably have to use the dope in the middle to actually get it to take the shape. So I've just trimmed around the edges like that. I'm going to pick it up and then I'm going to try and carefully wrap these edges around, if the glue will let me. And for the most part that's working. Seems to be flattening down quite nicely. Wrapping around the edges, which is what we want. Now one of the drawbacks with using this tissue paste is it's not soluble. So you can't, well, it's not soluble once it's dry, so if you want to remove the tissue afterwards, you're not going to be able to do that. You have to sand it away. You get it on correctly and you don't have to remove it, and it's not an issue. Some of you that are doing this in your house, this doesn't smell, whereas dope does. And Deluxe Materials also do a water-based sealer. We'll call it dope, but it's I think they call it easy dope. Never used it, but I should really give it a go and see what it's like. Trying to put the smallest amount I can on there. Well, that's actually looking really promising. If we can actually get the tissue to touch in the middle, the way we did with the rudder, but without it shrinking too much and distorting the outline. That's pretty good. So we'll let that dry and I'll do the other one. I'm going to try a little bit of an experiment. I took the rudder covering off because I really wasn't happy with it, and I've added some carbon rod on the inside of these three sides to make it stiffer. So I've then covered it in tissue, same tissue that I've always been using, but it seems I'm probably using the wrong tissue. I hate tissuing. I never really got the hang of it. I can wet tissue, but this dry tissuing doesn't really work. So this was put on dry with tissue paste, which is a Deluxe Materials product. And you're supposed to spray it with water and then it would shrink, but it doesn't. Now the way I always use it is I always put it on wet and stretch it out while it's still wet, and then when it dries it shrinks. So, but this, what should happen with good tissue is that you can put it on dry and it's like that, then you spray it with water and it shrinks. Well, this isn't doing that, so this is not really very good. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to apply some dope to shrink that just a bit. But if you remember, the structure of the Blackburn is such that you have a single piece of material in the middle and then a chamfered edge all the way around. Now I simulated it with balsa on the fin, but what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to simulate it a little bit more precisely, and I'm going to use these little pieces of templates, and they're labelled thus, so bottom, but they've got sellotape on one side, and that's the side that's going to go onto the surface. It's on the other bottom one. It's the other bottom one, and that goes with an arrow to the top, and that goes the other side of that bit there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a coat of dope on the tissue, then I'm going to put the template on, or the shaper on, then I'm going to clamp it like that. And what that should do is glue the two layers of tissue together, but leave a nicely formed chamfer around the outside. And we'll see if that works. Yeah, it should only need one clamp, I think. But I've made templates for all the three sections of this, and we'll see if that works. The tape is just, the sellotape is just to stop the balsa sticking to this. Anyway, let's give it a go. Now this is a low taut dope. Now I wanted to use a non-shrinking dope, but I haven't got any, and I've had to order some, and it should be arriving in the next few days. But as the tissue hasn't shrunk anyway, I'm going to go with this low taut, and with a bit of luck I'm just going to put one coat on it. So and there we go. So all I'm going to do is just let that stand, and with a bit of luck that will dry and shrink as well. Certainly hope so. Otherwise that's all coming off and we're starting again. Okay, it's been 20 minutes. That's flashed off. All I'm going to do is just take these off, because dope keeps shrinking for quite some time, so it'll have stuck the two halves together hopefully, so I should be able to remove the layers. Okay, that's not dried under there, but that's hardly surprising. The air's not getting to it, so it's probably a good reason to take this off. But it should have stuck around the edges of the perimeter, which is exactly what I wanted to do. And we'll just leave it for a little longer, just see if it'll actually get rid of some of these wrinkles that have appeared around the edges. But we've got a nice crisp line demarking or showing the area around the chamfered bits. So that's good. Let's just hope it actually has stuck the two layers together. I didn't know, and I've not removed it too soon. Anyway, we'll let that dry a bit more and we'll see. So I removed the bits of balsa, and you can see it's left a nice edge to the lines. I'm still not happy with the little wrinkles that are appearing in the corners, although it was lovely and tight at first. It's just little tiny wrinkles have appeared. So I'm not getting it right. I hate tissuing, but I'll persevere. At least I've got rid of the wrinkles from the edges, and I think that's probably usable now. What I might do, and I may be carrying it too far, but actually on the full size it has tapes over all the tubing, and I was trying to find out whether it's only on one side, which is what I thought it was, but some of the pictures I've looked at, it looks like the tape's on both sides. So although the fabric is only in one layer, it looks like the pipework or the tubing is taped. So I could use some tissue just to tape the edges, as most of the wrinkles, as minor as they are in the edges. So when I put the tape over it, it might just mask them. Or I could just not worry about it and just keep going. We'll see, I'll think about it. Anyway, I've now got to decide what I'm going to do with the these other pieces. Whether I'm going to use this sandwich method where I sort of clamp these formers in there, or whether I just try squeezing it with my fingers. And I might try that, actually, just doing it with my fingers, because I think I might have a little bit more control of where these wrinkles are appearing. So I'll give that a try next. So what I actually did was I covered it in the low taut shrinking dope, and just put a put a layer on both sides, and then I ran my finger up and down and around as it dried. And what that's done is stuck it down in the middle and left the chamfered edge on the sides. It stopped. It's not a nice demarcation line like we had with the rudder, but it's not got the wrinkles around the edge that we got on the rudder. So I think this is probably a better option. All that needs now is a few more coats just to seal it. It's nearly there, but there's one coat bit on there, but we need probably another one or two. But I'm going to wait for the non-shrinking dope to seal it completely. Okay, so there we go. So that's the two tailplane pieces and the rudder, the fin. I also made the cruciform, which goes on the back of the fuselage to support the tailplane elevator and the fin and rudder. So that's ready to go on as well. None of these will be fitted to the model until after they're painted. So I'm not sure what's next. I'll have a good think about it, but I might swing across to the wings and build as much of the wings as I can. I know we're still waiting for the carbon toes to make the wingtips, but I might be able to do the rest of the wings. Okay, hopefully that's enough to fill this video up and you're not getting too bored of all this. It's actually taking a lot longer than I thought, but never mind. If you're enjoying it and you want to continue receiving the alerts, press like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.